A man in Washington state being held on a $500,000 bail for threatening to kill Seattle Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, one of the 27 progressives who, by the way, voted against the bill that enhanced security for the Supreme Court justices and their immediate families. So let's talk about the irony of the situation in tonight's lightning round with KTTH Seattle talk radio host Jason Rantz. Jason, this sounds terrifying. This guy was outside of her home. She calls police and they come and find him. I mean, it's much like the Justice Kavanaugh situation. Something we don't want happening to anybody.
Exactly, and that's the point. The police were able to respond very quickly, although this is a congresswoman who supports the defund movement. He was originally put in jail with a very high bail, which is something that this congresswoman has been fighting against. Although, to be clear, within the last few hours, actually, he's been released as the King County prosecutors are making their case and trying to figure out whether or not they're going to charge. But, you know, the irony is obviously there. We don't want any politician to have to deal with this, and we don't like it when people show up to politicians' homes to protest, whether it's peacefully or not. When you're doing it with the intent to intimidate someone into changing a position, we know that it's wrong. So I'm hopeful that the Congresswoman will look at this and say, maybe I ought to rethink some of my positions now that I've had the unfortunate experience that these conservative justices have had.
And her staff did put out a statement that she's very grateful for the swift and professional response from the Seattle Police Department, U.S. Capitol Police, and FBI investigators. So credit where credit is due. She is thanking those folks who were there to, in this situation, protect her and her family. Okay, so now this is a story you flagged for us. You always have the best stuff. The Olympia School District Education Foundation. I want to put this up there. They've identified their highest priorities for new members, and you can explain this to us. I think this is for a volunteer position. They want people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color and or are multilingual, individuals with a professional background in mental health, marketing, and nonprofits, those who are LGBTQIAA+, and those who are living in or have experienced poverty. What's going on here?
Yeah, so by the way, LGBTQIAA+, I have no idea what the second A stands for. I'm a member of this alphabet club, and I don't understand some of these letters. But the goal here is obviously to say, hey, cisgendered white men, please don't apply. We have no interest whatsoever in appointing you as to one of these volunteers to help this school district, which I think obviously is a disservice, because if you have someone who happens to be a white cisgendered male who actually would be good, you should probably consider them. But when you look at this application, I mean, I don't work in HR, but I can't imagine anyone in HR saying, why don't you ask in an application gender identity, sexual orientation, immigrant status, race, religion, disability, and all of these other questions in a way that seems to be directly tied to the application. So, you know, sometimes we see some of these questions for statistical purposes, but this is a Google form that you're filling out with your name and email address. And while the questions are optional, I mean, very clearly they're trying to engineer this to get a certain kind of person.
Well, we've put it up on the screen so people can see what we're talking about. And I did used to be a labor and employment lawyer, and no, as in a formal, this is a volunteer situation, but in an employment situation, I would never, ever, ever counsel any client to ask any of these questions other than what are your qualifications for the job. Okay, so now let's talk about this. The president's back and forth, some difficult poll numbers. Here's some back and forth he had over with the press corps.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they don't.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
A majority of Democrats say they don't want you to run again in 2024.
92% said if I did, they'd vote for me.
Okay, so to clarify, 64% said they didn't want him to be the nominee, but then asked if he ran again against President Trump, 92% of Democrats said they would vote for him. He should be concerned it's not 100% when that's the matchup.
Absolutely. And he should also look at some of the other polling breakdowns, because it found that 94% of Democrats under the age of 30 want someone other than Biden to run for president. And if you have lost the younger demographic of your base, of your party, that's obviously not good news. And, you know, look, I look at this president and I kind of feel bad to a degree. He clearly knows we're going in the wrong direction. He's desperate for any kind of positive spin on this, but you could only spin this so much and no one's going to buy it.
All right. Well, at least well, you can always find a poll to say what you want. I'll say that. Jason, thank you very much.
Thanks.